The stars burned cold in the void of space where two massive fleets circled each other like predators waiting for the killing blow to land. The Zelthari Empire had been fighting the Kronok Dominion for 3 full solar cycles, and neither side showed any sign of backing down from this bitter war that had consumed entire star systems and billions of lives on both sides of the conflict. Their battleships fired plasma cannons en masse, drivers at each other in the darkness near a star system called Tertius, which held 4 planets and dozens of moons that both empires claimed as rightfully theirs by ancient treaties and conquest. Into this mess of burning metal and explosive decompression came something neither side had ever seen before. A ship emerged from faster-than-light travel, right in the middle of their battlefield, and its design was completely unknown to either the Zelthari or the Kronak military databases. The vessel looked strange with smooth curves instead of the angular military designs both empires favored, and it broadcast signals on frequencies that made no sense to either side's communication officers. Captain Elena Vasquez sat in the command chair of the human survey vessel Perseverance and watched. Her screens light up with weapons locks from approximately 40 different warships that all seemed very interested in destroying her ship. "Get a translation matrix running now," she barked at her communications officer while her hands gripped the armrests hard enough to turn her knuckles white. The Perseverance had been on a routine exploration mission for the United Earth Space Agency when their jump calculations had gone wrong and dropped them here in what was very clearly an active war zone. Lieutenant Sarah Park worked frantically at her station trying to decode the alien languages flooding their receivers while weapons fire crossed the space around them in streams of superheated plasma and solid projectiles. "Captain, I think I have something," Park said as her translation software finally found patterns in the alien communications. "Broadcast on all frequencies," Vasquez ordered, and cleared her throat before speaking slowly and clearly. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the Earth vessel Perseverance, and we come in peace with no hostile intent toward any party in this region of space." Her words were translated by the ship's computer into mathematical concepts and universal scientific principles that any spacefaring civilization should understand. For exactly 5 seconds, both alien fleets stopped firing at each other. Then, every single weapon system turned toward the human ship instead. "They are not stopping," shouted her tactical officer Marcus Webb as proximity alarms screamed throughout the bridge. A Kronok plasma torpedo, the size of a small car, slammed into the Perseverance's port engine and tore through the fusion reactor shielding like tissue paper. The ship shuddered and spun as secondary explosions rippled through the engineering sections and emergency bulkheads slammed shut to contain the damage. "We are going down," Webb reported as his board lit up red across every system. "Where?" Vasquez demanded while fighting to keep her seat as the artificial gravity fluctuated wildly. "The 4th planet in this system," Webb answered while working his controls to give them any chance at all of surviving the landing. Tertius 4 filled their view screens as the Perseverance fell toward it, trailing debris and atmosphere. The planet looked green and blue and almost Earth-like from orbit, which gave Vasquez a small hope that maybe they could survive long enough for a rescue. The ship hit the atmosphere hard, and the hull began to glow red from friction, while the crew strapped themselves in and prayed to whatever gods they believed in. Trees rushed up at them through the view screen, and then the Perseverance was crashing through a jungle canopy that slowed them just enough that the impact did not kill everyone instantly. Metal screamed and tore as the ship plowed through vegetation and soil before finally coming to rest at an angle in a clearing that the crash had created. Vasquez unbuckled with shaking hands and checked her crew. Everyone was alive, though. Dr. James Chen had a nasty cut on his forehead, and Engineering Chief Maria Santos was holding her ribs carefully. "Damage report," Vasquez ordered while pulling herself up. Main engines are gone and the reactor is scrammed, Webb reported. Life support is on batteries, and we have maybe 72 hours of air. If we don't fix the recyclers, communications are down except for short range, Park added. I cannot reach anyone off this planet. Chun wiped blood from his face and moved to check the other crew members for injuries, while Santos went to assess the engineering damage. At least we are alive, Vasquez said, and immediately regretted it as the universe decided to prove her wrong. The exterior sensors that still worked showed movement in the jungle around them, and not the friendly kind of movement either. Something large was circling their crash site, and the thermal readings suggested it was very much alive and very much interested in the new arrivals to its territory. Then the sensors picked up something else. Two distinct signatures that matched neither the local wildlife nor human technology. We have company, Webb announced. Two groups approaching from different directions, and they are not trying to hide. Through the cracked viewports, they could see shimmer fields that marked cloaked observation posts becoming visible as their operators apparently decided stealth was no longer necessary. The Zelthari post materialized to the north, and it bristled with scanning equipment pointed directly at the crashed human ship. The Kronak post appeared to the south, and it looked just as interested in studying the humans. Both alien forces had clearly followed the Perseverance down and set up monitoring stations to watch what happened next. They are just watching us, Park said, with confusion in her voice. Chun looked at the readings from the planet's atmosphere and soil, and his expression went pale. Captain, we have a problem, he said quietly. The air here has compounds that are toxic to most carbon-based life and the local ecosystem. Shows evolutionary adaptations to incredibly hostile environment. How hostile? Vasquez asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Everything here is probably trying to kill everything else, Chun replied. The plants show defensive toxins, and the animals show venom adaptations and aggressive predator behaviors. Vasquez looked at her crew, and then at the alien observation posts, watching them like scientists studying lab rats. They are waiting to see if we survive, she realized. They think this planet is going to kill us for them. The jungle around them rustled with unseen movement, and something in the distance roared with a sound that promised violence. Captain Elena Vasquez squared her shoulders and looked at her crew. Then I suggest we prove them wrong, she said. We are humans, and we have survived worse than this. She hoped that was true because the alternative was dying on an alien world while two warring empires watched and took notes on human biology. The Perseverance settled into the soil with creaks of stress. Metal and outside the jungle waited with teeth and claws and venom. Welcome to Tertius IV, where everything wanted you dead, and the only witnesses were enemies who expected you to fail. Humanity had just entered the war between the Zelthari and the Kronak, but nobody knew it yet, not even the humans themselves. Dr. James Chun stepped out of the Perseverance's damaged airlock wearing a hastily modified environmental suit and carrying a sample collection kit that he hoped would help them understand what exactly was trying to kill them on this planet. The jungle pressed in around the crash site like a living wall of green and purple, vegetation that seemed to pulse with hostile intent. Within the Zelthari observation post 3 kilometers north, Commander Zaltith watched the human through high-powered scanners and made notes on a datapad with his 3-fingered hands. The human is gathering biological samples, he reported to his science officer. It appears they do not understand the danger. In the Kronak monitoring station to the South War Leader, Dremek snorted through his breathing vents and gestured at the holographic display showing Chun's movements. They will learn soon enough, Dremek said to his subordinates. Everything on this cursed world is death wrapped in pretty colors. Most alien commanders had lost troops to Tertius IV's ecosystem, and they knew intimately how the local life forms killed intruders. Chen carefully cut samples from plants that his scanner marked as highly toxic and sealed them in containers while making voice notes about cellular structures and chemical compositions. He was so focused on his work that he almost missed the movement in the undergrowth behind him. The Kesrith struck fast as lightning, and its fangs sank deep into Chun's calf right through his environmental suit before he could even turn around. The creature looked like a serpent mixed with a centipede, and it was 2 meters long with scales that shifted colors to match its surroundings perfectly. Chun stumbled backward and fell as the Kesrith released him and slithered away into the jungle, satisfied with its defensive strike against the intruder. Chun is down. Park's voice crackled over the radio from inside the ship. Vitals are spiking. Vasquez and Webb rushed out in their suits and dragged Chun back inside while he clutched his leg and gritted his teeth against the pain. In the Zelthari post, Zolteth made another note. Human was bitten by a Kesrith and injected with full venom load, he recorded. Previous observations indicate death occurs within 6 to 8 minutes for most species. The Kronak station was already transmitting footage back to Fleet Command showing the bite and preparing to document human death for analysis. Inside the Perseverance, Chun was placed on a medical bed while the ship's medical AI scanned him and began frantically synthesizing compounds to counter the venom spreading through his bloodstream. His temperature spiked to dangerous levels, and sweat poured from his face as his immune system went to war with the alien toxins. Vasquez stood by his side feeling helpless, while Santos and Webb worked to reroute power to the medical bay. His liver is processing the venom, the AI reported in its calm synthetic voice. Antibody production is elevated, and his metabolism has increased by 40%. 6 minutes passed, and Chun was still alive, though he looked terrible. 8 minutes passed, and he was still breathing. 10 minutes later, the fever broke, and Chun opened his eyes. That was unpleasant, he managed to say with a weak smile. Both alien observation posts went silent as their operators stared at their readings in disbelief. No species they knew could survive Kesrith venom, and yet the human was not only alive, but appeared to be recovering. Commander Zolteth sent an urgent message to his fleet admiral, requesting verification that his sensors were functioning correctly. War leader Drumek ordered his science team to run full diagnostics because clearly something was wrong with their equipment. But the equipment was fine, and Chun really had survived. By the next morning, he was up and moving around the ship, though still sore and tired from his immune system's battle. The crew had bigger problems now. "We need food," Santos reported to Vasquez. "The replicators are damaged beyond repair, and our emergency rations will last maybe 2 weeks. If we stretch them, the local ecosystem is our only option," Chun said, from where he sat reviewing his samples. "We need to identify what is edible, or at least what will not kill us." He pulled up data on his tablet showing the Kesrith's biological structure. "Interestingly, this creature that bit me appears to be protein-rich, and the meat itself may be edible if we can remove the venom. Glands properly." Vasquez stared at him. "You want to eat the thing that almost killed you. I want to eat something, and that appears to be what we have available," Chun replied. "The venom is stored in specific glands, and the muscle tissue shows no toxin presence." Park made a face, but Webb was already nodding. "We have traps and nets in the cargo bay," he said. "If these things are territorial, they will probably come back." They did come back. 3 Kesrith were caught in Webb's carefully placed traps by the end of the day, and Chun supervised as they were killed quickly and butchered with extreme care. The venom glands were removed and stored in sealed containers for potential medical research while the meat was prepared for cooking. In both observation posts, the aliens watched this with growing confusion. "They are processing the Kesrith for consumption," Zolteth reported, and his mandibles clicked with agitation. "This behavior makes no sense from a survival perspective. Perhaps they do not understand what they are doing," suggested one of his officers. "Perhaps they are insane," Drumek countered from the Kronak post. No sane species would eat apex predators from a death world, but the humans were doing exactly that. Santas rigged a cooking device from spare parts and heated the kesrith meat until it was thoroughly cooked while the crew gathered around cautiously. Chum took the first bite because it had been his idea, and if anyone was going to die from this experiment, it should be him. He chewed thoughtfully while everyone watched. "It tastes like chicken," he finally said. "Slightly spicy chicken with a weird aftertaste, but it is definitely edible." The crew ate carefully at first and then with more enthusiasm when nobody died or showed adverse reactions. The footage of humans eating kesrith was transmitted to both fleet commands and flagged as high priority. The admirals and generals from both empires watched the recordings multiple times trying to understand what they were seeing. Military intelligence analysts debated whether this was psychological warfare or genuine survival behavior. Xenobiologists demanded more data on human physiology and evolutionary history. Over the following weeks, the humans continued their pattern of turning Tertius IV's deadly ecosystem into their food supply. Chun identified a plant called Jora that released paralytic spores and discovered that heating it to high temperatures neutralized the toxins while creating an interesting, spicy flavor. Webb caught what the locals called stone crabs, which secreted acid from their shells that could melt through armor plating. The humans steamed them and cracked the shells carefully and ate the meat inside with something Chun made from local fungi that resembled butter. Every meal was documented by the watching aliens. Every impossible survival was recorded and transmitted. The war between the Zelthari and Kronuk continued in orbit above Tertius IV, but increasingly the chatter in both fleets was about the humans who ate death and asked for seconds. Vasquez organized her crew into efficient hunting and gathering parties while they worked to repair their ship. Santos made progress on the communication systems and hoped to eventually call for rescue. Parks studied the alien languages and learned more about the war they had stumbled into. Webb set up defensive perimeters and mapped the area around their crash site. And Chun turned the nightmare jungle into a cookbook. "Captain, we've identified another food source," he announced one evening. "There is a large predator in the area that the aliens call a thresher, and it appears to have excellent meat-to-bone ratio." "How large?" Vasquez asked. "About the size of an earth elephant," Chun replied cheerfully. "With 6 legs and acid saliva and a very aggressive temperament." Vasquez looked at her crew, and they all had the same expression. They were hungry, and they were human, and they had already eaten everything else this planet had thrown at them. "Set the traps," she ordered. In the observation posts, both alien commanders wondered if they were watching the birth of a legend or just a very slow form of suicide. Either way, they could not look away. The thresher crashed through the jungle like a living tank, and its 6 legs tore up the ground as it charged toward the bait that Webb had carefully positioned near a cluster of sturdy trees. Marcus Webb waited in those trees with a magnetic harpoon launcher that Santos had built from salvaged ship parts, and his heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. "Steady," Vasquez said over the radio from her position on the opposite side of the clearing. "Let it get closer." The creature was massive and covered in armor-like scales that shifted between green and brown, and its mouth dripped with saliva that hissed when it hit the ground and left small smoking craters in the soil. In the Kronak observation post-war, leader Dramak leaned forward in his command chair and watched the scene with intense interest. "They are hunting a thresher," he said to his officers with disbelief coloring his voice. "A full-grown thresher that killed an entire platoon of my best warriors last month." His science officer checked the records and nodded. "Confirmed," she said. "That specific thresher has 17 confirmed chronic kills and at least 12 Zelthari based on the scar patterns." In the Zelthari post, Commander Zoltith was thinking the same thing as he watched. The humans prepare their ambush with primitive weapons and what appeared to be complete confidence in their ability to kill. something that had destroyed armed soldiers with military-grade equipment. "This is either brilliant or suicidal," Zoltef muttered. "I am not certain which." The Thresher reached the bait and lowered its massive head to investigate the scent when Webb fired his harpoon, and the magnetic projectile slammed into the creature's shoulder and stuck fast. The Thresher roared with a sound that shook leaves from the trees and spun toward Webb's position. But the harpoon was attached to a cable, and that cable was wrapped around the trees in a pattern that Webb and Park had spent hours calculating. As the Thresher moved, the cable pulled tight and the creature's legs became tangled. It thrashed and tried to melt through the cable with its acid saliva, but Santos had coated the cable with a polymer she had synthesized specifically to resist the acid. Vasquez emerged from cover with another harpoon launcher and fired into the Thresher's other side. More cables pulled tight, and the creature went down hard with its legs completely immobilized. Chun appeared with what looked like a long spear made from a broken support beam, and he moved with surprising speed to drive it into the gap between the Thresher's armored scales, right where his research had indicated the major arteries were located. The creature thrashed one more time and then went still. 6 humans had just killed an apex predator that regularly destroyed armed military units. They had done it with improvised weapons and careful planning, and absolute refusal to believe that anything on this planet was too dangerous to eat. Both alien observation posts transmitted the footage immediately and flagged it as urgent. This time, the response from both fleet commands was not disbelief, but something closer to concern. "What exactly are these humans?" one Zelthari admiral asked his staff. "And why do they treat a death world like a hunting preserve?" The Kronak High Command was having similar discussions. "Their technology is not superior to ours," one general pointed out. "Their ship was disabled with a single torpedo. But their biology," another general replied. "Their adaptability and aggression and complete lack of fear. That is more concerning than any weapon back on Tertius IV." The humans were busy butchering the Thresher and discussing cooking methods. "We can smoke some of it for preservation," Chun suggested while taking samples of different muscle groups. "The rest we should cook fresh." Santos had built what she called a barbecue pit from rocks and metal plating, and she was very proud of it. Webb and Park were hauling sections of Thresher meat that weighed more than they did and arguing about whether it would taste more like chicken or pork. "Everything tastes like chicken," Park insisted. "That is because you have no sophisticated palate," Webb countered. "This clearly has more of a pork texture." Vasquez supervised the operation and tried not to think about how insane this all was. They were stranded on an alien planet in the middle of a war zone, and they were having a barbecue. But they were also human, and humans had been doing exactly this kind of thing since they first figured out how to make fire. The smell of cooking meat filled the clearing and drifted through the jungle. In the observation posts, the aliens detected the chemical signatures of proteins being heated and broken down into amino acids. "They are actually eating it," Zoltith said, with his mandibles clicking rapidly. "They killed a Thresher, and now they are consuming it." His officers had no response, because what could they say to something so far outside their understanding of normal behavior? The Kronak were equally stunned. Dremek had served in the military for 20 years and had seen many strange things in the war, but nothing had prepared him for watching another species treat his nightmares like livestock. Over the next several weeks, the pattern continued and intensified. The humans explored their surroundings with scientific curiosity and complete disregard for the danger. Chun found a grove of trees that produced fruit that caused violent hallucinations in both Zilthari and Kronak physiology. The humans tested it carefully and discovered that fermenting the juice created something alcoholic that they could drink in small amounts without adverse effects. Park named it jungle wine, and Santos made labels for the bottles they stored it in. There were plants that expelled clouds of razor-sharp seeds when disturbed, and the humans harvested them for the edible roots. Underneath, while wearing protective gear, there were insects that injected paralyzing venom, and the humans caught them, studied them, and then fed them to the thresher meat. They were smoking because it apparently improved the flavor. Every single thing the aliens had learned to fear and avoid the humans either ate or used or turned into something useful. The monitoring posts has been watching for 6 weeks now, and the data they collected was changing how both empires viewed the war and their place in the galaxy. These humans survived exposure to 17 different lethal toxins, one Zelthari scientist reported. Their liver function is extraordinarily efficient, and their immune systems are aggressive to the point of recklessness. They consume other predators, a chronic analyst added to her report. They show pack hunting behaviors and tool use, and absolutely no fear response to danger. They are adaptable, another analyst concluded. Dangerously adaptable. The war continued, but something was shifting in how both sides viewed the conflict. Officers who had been fighting for 3 years started asking questions about why they were fighting. What were they trying to prove? What were they trying to win? The humans had been on Tertius 4 for less than 2 months, and they had accomplished more than either military had managed in years of occupation. They had mapped the ecosystem and cataloged hundreds of species and created a sustainable food supply. They had not just survived, but thrived in an environment that both empires considered uninhabitable. And they had done it while being watched by enemies who could have killed them at any time. Vasquez was reviewing their progress when Park came running with exciting news. "Captain, I got the long-range communications working," Park announced. "We can send a signal to Earth." "How long until rescue?" Vasquez asked. "At least 6 months," Park admitted. "We are very far from home." Vasquez nodded and looked at her crew, who were healthy and well-fed and in good spirits despite everything. "Then I suppose we keep doing what we have been doing," she said. "We survive." Chun was already planning the next hunting expedition. Webb was reinforcing their perimeter. Santos was improving their equipment. Park was learning more about the aliens watching them. And in both observation posts, the watchers were beginning to wonder if maybe they had been fighting the wrong war. The humans had shown them something important. Survival was not about having the best weapons or the most territory. It was about adapting and learning and refusing to give up. It was about turning obstacles into opportunities. It was about eating what tried to kill you and asking for seconds. Commander Zoltith made a decision that would change everything. "Open a channel to the Chronic Post," he ordered. His officers stared at him in shock. "Sir, that violates every protocol," one of them protested. "I am aware," Zoltith replied. "But I believe we need to talk about what we are seeing here in the Chronic Post." Dramak received the incoming communication and hesitated for only a moment before accepting it. The two commanders looked at each other across their displays and saw their own confusion reflected back. "This is unusual," Dramak said carefully. "We are enemies." "We are," Zoltith agreed. "But we are both watching the same thing, and I think we need to discuss it." And so they talked while the humans continued their impossible survival. Nobody knew it yet, but this was the beginning of something new. The storm came down from the mountains like the wrath of an angry god, and the purple clouds, twisted with lightning that struck the jungle in patterns that seemed almost intelligent. Captain Vasquez stood outside the Perseverance and watched the weather system approach with concern etched on her face. "Everyone inside," she ordered over the radio. "This looks bad." In the Zelthari observation post commander, Zoltith was watching the same storm and making similar decisions. "We need to evacuate to the backup position," he told his team. "This installation cannot withstand those winds." The Kronak monitoring station was closer to the storm's path, and war leader Dramak was already ordering his people to pack essential equipment. "Move quickly," he commanded. "We have perhaps 30 minutes before it hits." What none of them had anticipated was that the backup positions for both alien teams would be in the same direction, and that Direction was toward the human crash site. The storm hit like a hammer and the wind tore through the jungle, ripping trees from the ground and sending debris flying through the air like missiles. The Zelthari team ran through the chaos, carrying their equipment and trying to find shelter. The Kronak squad did the same from a different angle. Both groups saw the lights from the human camp at the same time, and both groups hesitated, because approaching the enemy was dangerous, but staying in the storm was suicide. Vasquez saw the aliens coming and made a decision that her superiors back on Earth would probably question, but which felt right in the moment. "Webb, get a fire going in the clearing," she ordered. "Park, find tarps and rope and build some shelter extensions." "Captain, they are enemies," Webb pointed out while already moving to follow her orders. "They are people caught in a storm," Vasquez replied. "We help people." She walked out to meet the approaching aliens with her hands visible and empty, and her posture as non-threatening as she could make it. The Zelthari team arrived first, and Zolteth stopped when he saw the human captain standing in the rain. "You are inviting us to shelter," he said through his translator, and his mandibles showed confusion. "I am," Vasquez replied. The storm does not care about politics. The Kronak team emerged from the other side of the clearing, and Dremek saw his enemies already there, and his hand went to his weapon. "Stand down," Vasquez said firmly, and stepped between the two groups. "You can fight each other after the storm, or you can come inside where it is dry and warm. Your choice." Lightning struck a tree 50 meters away, and the explosion made the decision for everyone. All three groups moved under the tarps that Park had strung up and into the area where Webb had a fire burning in a metal container that provided heat and light. The aliens stood on opposite sides of the space and glared at each other while the humans moved around like this was completely normal. "Sit," Vasquez said, and pointed to the various containers and crates arranged around the fire. "We have food." Chan emerged from the Perseverance, carrying a large pot that steamed in the cool air, and the smell coming from it was rich and complex. "Thresh a stew with Jora spices and root vegetables," he announced cheerfully. "I made extra this morning." He ladled the stew into bowls and handed them to the aliens, who took them automatically because they were too surprised to refuse. Zolteth looked down at his bowl, and his scanners immediately identified multiple compounds that should have been lethal. "This contains toxins," he said. "Yep," Chun agreed. "We cook them out, or neutralize them, or in some cases, our bodies just deal with them. You might want to try a small amount first." Dremek stared at his bowl, and then at the humans who were eating the same stew with obvious enjoyment. Pride and curiosity warred in his mind. He was Kronak, and Kronak did not show fear, especially not in front of Zelthari. He took a small bite and waited for his digestive system to reject it. Instead, he tasted something savory and complex and surprisingly pleasant. Zolteth saw his enemy eat and refused to be outdone. He tried the stew as well and found it edible and actually quite good. "How?" Zolteth asked. "How do you survive what kills us?" Chun sat down on a crate and launched into an explanation that he had been preparing for weeks. "Earth is what you would call a death world," he began. "Our planet has extreme temperature variations and aggressive predators and diseases and parasites and natural disasters. Humanity evolved by surviving all of it." He pulled up images on his tablet showing Earth's ecosystems from tropical jungles to frozen tundras to deep oceans. "We are persistence hunters," Chun continued. "We are not the strongest or the fastest, but we are adaptable and we refuse to quit. Our ancestors survived by eating almost anything, and our bodies developed systems to handle toxins and diseases." Santos joined the conversation and added her perspective. "Our immune systems are incredibly aggressive," she said. "We produce antibodies quickly, and our livers can process a wide range of compounds. We also have high pain tolerance and good healing ability." Park brought up linguistic data on her screen. "We are also social creatures," she added. "We work together and share knowledge and help each other survive." Vasquez watched the aliens listening with fascination and saw an opportunity. "Why are you fighting?" she asked bluntly. The question hung in the air like smoke. Dremek and Zoltith looked at each other and for the first time really considered the question. "The Kronek claimed this system by right of discovery," Dremek said. "The Zelthari were here first," Zoltith countered. "Our colony ships arrived 300 years ago. Our probe data shows presence 400 years ago," Dremek replied. They both stopped and listened to themselves. Hundreds of years of disputed history over a system neither side could actually colonize because the planets were too hostile. "We've been watching you for 6 weeks," Zoltith said to Vasquez. "You landed on a planet that killed dozens of our best scouts, and you not only survived but thrived. You eat our nightmares," Dremek added. "You show no fear." "We show fear," Webb interjected. "We just do not let it stop us." The storm raged outside while inside the makeshift shelter 3 species that should have been enemies sat around a fire and talked. They discussed biology and evolution and culture and technology. They shared stories about their homeworlds and their families and their hopes. The Kronek described their ocean world and their clan structures. The Zelthari talked about their hive cities and their artistic traditions. The humans showed pictures of Earth and explained concepts like coffee and pizza and dogs. Somewhere in those conversations, the weapons were forgotten. Somewhere in the sharing of food and warmth, the ancient hatreds became less important. Chun explained how human bodies processed the thresh of venom, and Santa showed them the chemistry behind neutralizing the Jora toxins. Park taught them some basic human phrases and laughed when they tried to pronounce words with their different vocal structures. Vasquez watched it all and felt something shift in the universe. This was not diplomacy or politics or military strategy. This was just people being people. When the storm finally passed and the 3 groups prepared to return to their respective positions, there was a moment of awkwardness. "Thank you for the shelter," Zoltith said formally. "And the food," Dremek added. "You are welcome," Vasquez replied. "The fire will be here if you need it again." The aliens left, and the humans watched them go. "That was either very smart or very stupid," Webb said. "Time will tell," Vasquez agreed. But something had changed, and everyone felt it. In the Zelthari observation post, Zoltith sat down and composed a message to his fleet admiral that would probably end his career. He recommended opening formal diplomatic channels with the humans. He suggested that perhaps the war over Tertius IV was pointless if neither side could survive there anyway. He proposed that maybe there was a better way. In the Kronak station, Dremek was writing a similar message. He reported that the humans represented a potential ally or a significant threat depending on how first contact was handled. He noted that their adaptability and fearlessness made them dangerous, but their willingness to share resources made them potentially valuable partners. He recommended dialogue. Both messages were sent. Both admirals read them. Both fleets began to reconsider their positions. And in the human camp, Vasquez gathered her crew. "We might have just accidentally started peace talks," she said. "By feeding people," Chun replied with a grin. "Humans have been doing diplomacy through food for thousands of years," Park pointed out. "Breaking bread together builds trust. Then I suggest we make more bread," Vasquez said. "Or whatever the alien equivalent is." The crew got to work preparing for what might come next. They did not know it yet, but they had just changed the course of an entire war, one meal at a time. The messages from Commander Zoltith and War Leader Dremek traveled through space at faster-than-light speeds and arrived at their respective fleet commands within hours of being sent. Admiral Kresh of the Zelthari Third Fleet read Zoltith's report 3 times before calling an emergency meeting of his senior staff. "My field commander is suggesting we negotiate with an unknown species that appeared in our war zone and survived on the planet. That killed 24 of our scouts," Kresh said to the gathered officers. "His reasoning is that they fed him soup. The statement sounded absurd when spoken aloud, but the attached data was impossible to ignore. Grand Marshal Vorak of the Kronak Dominion was having a similar conversation with his war council. Dremep has never shown weakness, Vorak pointed out. If he says these humans are worth talking to, then I am inclined to listen. They are primitives who crashed on a death world, one general argued. Primitives who turned that death world into a farm, another general countered. And who survived toxins that kill our warriors in minutes. The debates raged in both fleets while on Tertius IV. The humans continued their daily routines of survival and improvement. Vasquez received a transmission on the communication system that Park had painstakingly repaired. It was from the Zelthari fleet, and it was not a threat. "This is Admiral Kresh of the Zelthari Empire," the translated message began. "We wish to discuss a potential meeting between our species." Vasquez felt her heart race as she crafted a response. "This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earth Space Agency," she replied. "We are willing to talk." The Kronak sent a similar message within the hour. Both empires wanted to meet these strange adaptable humans who ate death and offered shelter to enemies. But there was a complication. They both want separate meetings, Park reported after reviewing the communications. They do not trust each other enough to meet together. Vasquez thought about the night of the storm when Zelthari and Kronak had sat around the same fire and shared the same food. She made a decision that was either brilliant or insane. "Tell them we will only meet with both of them together," she said. "Here on Tertius IV, Captain, it could start a battle," Webb warned. "Or it could end a war," Vasquez replied. The message was sent and the response took 2 days. Both admirals agreed, though their messages dripped with reluctance and suspicion. "We need to prepare," Vasquez told her crew. "If we are going to host peace talks, we need to do it right." Chun immediately understood what she meant. "We need to feed them," he said. "A proper meal." "A feast," Santis agreed. The crew threw themselves into preparations with the same energy they had used to survive the planet. Webb and Park built a long table from salvaged hull plating and local wood. Chun and Santis planned a menu that would showcase everything they had learned about Tertius IV's ecosystem. Vasquez reviewed everything she knew about both alien cultures and tried to find common ground. The Zelthari valued art and beauty. The Kronak respected strength and honor. Humans appreciated both, and maybe that was the bridge they needed. The day of the meeting arrived, and 2 shuttles descended from orbit, carrying the leadership of both fleets. Admiral Kresh stepped out of the Zelthari shuttle, wearing ceremonial armor that gleamed in the sunlight. Grand Marshal Vorak emerged from the Kronak transport with an honor guard that bristled with weapons. Both leaders saw each other and tensed. Then they saw the humans waiting between them. Vasquez stood at the head of a table set for a feast with her crew arranged behind her in clean uniforms. They had carefully maintained for this exact purpose. "Welcome to Tertius IV," Vasquez said loudly enough for both groups to hear. "We are honored to host you." The smell of cooking food drifted from the preparation area, and both alien delegations noticed it immediately. "You prepared a meal," Kresh observed with his mandibles clicking in what might have been approval. "We did," Vasquez confirmed. "Please sit." The moment was tense as the 2 enemy leaders approached the same table. Years of hatred and warfare hung in the air like smoke. But the humans were there between them, and somehow that made it possible. Everyone sat, and for a moment, there was only awkward silence. Then Chun and Santis began serving the food. The first course was thresher meat carved into thin slices and prepared with Jura spices that had been carefully calibrated to be safe for all 3 species. "The species? This is the creature that killed my warriors," Vorak said as he examined the meat. "It is also delicious," Chung replied cheerfully. "Try it." Kresh took a bite first, and his expression showed surprise. Vorak followed and nodded slowly. The meal continued with course after course of impossible dishes. Stone crab prepared in the human style, root vegetables from the plants that expelled deadly seeds, fruit from the trees that caused hallucinations, now transformed into a harmless and pleasant dessert. Each dish came with a story of how the humans had survived it and learned from it and turned danger into sustenance. "You see death and you eat it," Kresh said with something like wonder in his voice. "We see protein," Webb replied. "And opportunity." Vasquez stood and raised a glass of the fermented Jora juice that they had taken to calling jungle wine. "You have been fighting over this planet for 3 years," she said. "You call it a death trap. We call it a grocery store with aggressive customer service." Both alien leaders made sounds that their translators interpreted as laughter. "The question is not who deserves this planet," Vasquez continued. "The question is, what are you really fighting for?" The words hung in the air and forced both admirals to confront something they had been avoiding. "We fight because we have always fought," Kresh admitted quietly. The reasons became less important than the fighting itself. "We fight for honor," Vorak added. "But there is no honor in endless war." The meal continued, but now the conversation shifted. They talked about resources and territory and old grievances. They discussed the possibility of sharing systems instead of fighting over them. They explored the idea that maybe 2 empires could coexist without destroying each other. The humans listened and occasionally offered perspectives from their own history. "Earth had many wars," Park said. "We fought over land and resources and ideology." "What stopped you?" Kresh asked. "We realized we were all on the same small planet," Santos replied, "and that working together was more productive than killing each other. It took a long time and many mistakes," Vasquez added. "But eventually we learned." Dramak and Zoltith had been invited to the feast as well, and they sat at the table with their superiors. They shared their observations from weeks of watching the humans survive. "They are adaptable beyond anything we have seen," Zoltith reported. "And they are generous even to those who might be enemies," Dramak added. "These qualities make them either valuable allies or dangerous opponents." Vorak looked at Vasquez with his 3 eyes that saw into the infrared spectrum. "What does Earth want from us?" he asked bluntly. "Right now we want to go home," Vasquez replied honestly. "But long term we would like to be friends." "Friends." Kresh repeated the word as if testing it. "Yes," Vasquez said. "We are new to the galaxy, and we have much to learn. We would prefer to learn from friends rather than enemies." The feast lasted into the evening, and by the time the dishes were cleared, something fundamental had shifted. The war did not end that night. Wars involving 2 massive empires and years of conflict could not be resolved with a single meal. But the first steps toward peace were taken. Kresh and Vorak agreed to a ceasefire in the Tertius system. They established communication protocols for diplomatic channels. They both offered to help repair the Perseverance and escort the humans home. "We will tell our governments about you," Kresh said. "And we will recommend formal alliance negotiations," Vorak added. Vasquez accepted their offers with gratitude and relief. Her crew would finally go home. As the alien leaders prepared to depart, Kresh turned to Vasquez one more time. "You changed the course of a war by feeding your enemies," he said. "Is this a common human strategy?" "Breaking bread together is one of our oldest traditions," Vasquez replied. "Sharing food builds trust, and trust builds peace." Vorak made a gesture that his translator called a salute. "You are a strange species," he said, "but I believe the galaxy will be better for your presence." The shuttles departed, and the humans were left alone in their camp on Turis 4. "We just accidentally became diplomats," Webb said. "By cooking dinner," Park added. "The historians back on Earth are going to love this story," Santos predicted. Chun was already taking notes for the academic papers he planned to write about xenobiology and interspecies relations. Vasquez sat down heavily and felt the weight of what had just happened. They had come to explore and had crashed into a war. They had survived by eating what tried to kill them. They had made peace by sharing what they had learned. It was very human and very strange, and somehow it had worked. The ceasefire held. Within a month, formal negotiations began between the Zelthari Empire and the Kronak Dominion. The Perseverance was repaired with help from both fleets. Earth was contacted and informed that humanity had made first contact with not one but two spacefaring civilizations. The diplomats and politicians back home scrambled to catch up with what a survey ship crew had accomplished. 6 months later, Captain Elena Vasquez and her crew returned to Earth as heroes. They were invited to speak at the United Nations and at scientific conferences and on talk shows. They told the story of Tertius IV over and over,